So, listen to this. Have you ever wondered if out there's someone as good as Messi who just hasn't been discovered? You know, like some hidden talent who managed to avoid every scout and is living a mediocre life away from the spotlight, shocking everyone who gets a glimpse of his talent but never quite making it to the top. I know that could feel like a legend, nothing more than a fairy tale, but well, just look at players like Carlos Bacca, who was selling fish in a market and working as a bus driver at the age of 24, only to become a two-time Europa League winner 4 years later, being arguably the player of the tournament in one of them. Hearing a story like that should be enough to convince you that those players exist. And well, there's one player who embodies that theory like no other. I'm talking about Davide Moscardelli. I have never gotten so many requests to make a video on a player who spent most of his career playing in the third tier. But I mean, it's no wonder that he generates this much hype. The guy is one of the strangest characters to ever grace this sport and easily one of the most talented. You go searching for info about him and the first few things that come up are articles with flashy titles like "Too good for the Ballon d'Or." Then you go and watch his compilations and you're completely floored by the incredible skills he's capable of pulling off. And in every video, everyone seems as impressed as you, with the comment section claiming it's like Messi and Zlatan had a child together. Others claiming he never reached the top because he just couldn't be bothered with the scrutiny that comes with that. You're left wondering what actual football legends would think of him. You dig for more info and you find that Costa Curta, one of the greatest defenders of all time, once watched him play and even said he plays as beautifully as Messi or Maradona. And just like that, out of nowhere, you're hooked. And so was I. I needed to know more about Davide Moscardelli. And you know what? He seems to have that effect on people. Between his skills and the beard, you just gotta know more about him. But the man is a complete mystery to most. And trust me, it took me a long time to find out all of this information about him, but it was worth it. Right from the start, the man surprises you. Because you know what? Davide Moscardelli is Belgian. Okay, obviously a guy with a name as cool as that has to be Italian. And you're right, the only reason he holds a Belgian passport is that at the time of his birth, his father, who was a pilot for the Italian Air Force, was deployed in Belgium. In reality, from what I figured out, he doesn't even have any memory of being in Belgium. His earliest memories consist of him and his family wandering the streets of Rome on their way to the Stadio Olimpico, because, you guessed it, they were all complete AS Roma fanatics. In fact, something that might surprise you considering Moscardelli's talent managed to go unnoticed for so long is that he himself played for AS Roma when he was a child. Not only did he play there for 2 years, but he was coached by the great Bruno Conti himself, and he was even allowed to step foot into the Stadio Olimpico working as a ball boy. So why did everyone at Roma fail to notice how good he was? Sadly, the answer is very simple. They played him in defense, never allowing him to go forward no matter how much he wanted to express his talent, which eventually led him to leave the club. However, the problem remained. Because of his height, no club ever gave him much of a shot at playing as a winger, and he eventually conformed to his role as a striker. And so, with the decision to leave Roma still heavily affecting his career progression, Moscardelli debuted at 17 years of age for Maccarese in the 7th division of Italian football. Honestly, I think by then he had pretty much accepted that a career in football wouldn't be for him. He was playing at such a low level that he claims he used to play for his team on Sunday morning, have lunch, and then join the ultras at the Stadio Olimpico, cheering for Totti and Batistuta, still dreaming of one day being one of them. However, he was wrong to think he had no chance back then, because only a little more than a year after leaving Maccarese, not only had he been signed by a first division team, but he would be getting compared to Batistuta himself. Okay, hear me out. After 4 years at his first club at 22 years of age, Moscardelli had not only helped him get promoted, but had impressed enough to earn a move to another minor team in the outskirts of Rome, Guidonia Villanova, in the 5th division. In fact, they were so excited to get him on the pitch at his new club that they even risked playing him before they had properly registered him, getting caught red-handed and being punished with a 10-point deduction, which should have been enough to completely ruin their season, if not for the fact they had the greatest of all time playing among them, with Moscardelli pulling off a mind-blowing 20 goals and 2 assists in 27 games, including a goal that he insists was the most beautiful one he ever scored, leading Guidonia to an unbelievable second place finish, only 1 point short of the top of the table, earning promotion even after being deducted of so many points. This should have been Moscardelli's breakout year. The fans were calling him Batigol in reference to his idol. The Belgium under-23 national team had approached him, and there were even some top-tier teams looking to sign him. But as you might imagine, things didn't work out too well. First of all, he rejected Belgium as he was probably just hoping Italy would soon come knocking on his door as well, and when it came to the transfer market, well, he did sign for Chievo, who at the time were literally competing for the UEFA Cup, but they weren't sure he was ready to take such a big step forward in his career, so before he had even put on their kit, they had sent him out on a co-ownership deal to San Giovanese in the 4th division. It'd be easy to believe this was the end of the story, that this was the kind of slippery slope he would not be able to get out of, but in reality, it was just 4 years away from receiving $1 million contract offer to play in a Champions League level team. Sounds impossible? Well, let me explain. So, at San Giovanese, he actually played really well, getting 15 goals in 30 matches, which gave him some hopes that Chievo would put their money on the table and bring him back. But in reality, the opposite happened, with San Giovanese triggering a clause to get him permanently attached to the club, only to then sell him to Triestina for €250,000, making a bit of a profit. Still, even though he was now playing in the second tier, some consider that piece of business wasn't the most favorable for him, worrying it was too big of a step forward for a player who had only recently become a pro. However, what they didn't foresee was that Moscardelli would hit some of the greatest form of his career immediately after arriving, scoring in 12 out of the first 20 matches he played for the club, earning his team an incredible 14 points out of the mere 26 they had accumulated, making him easily one of the most decisive players in the league, and that's without taking penalties and without taking into consideration the number of assists he might have provided. Still, over the rest of the season, his form dried up substantially, and following another year where he failed to match the standards set in his early days at Triestina, the club shocked everyone by closing a deal for the signing of legendary Dino Baggio, which in return led them to look for a way to offload Moscardelli. And it was at this moment, while still riding the waves created by that period of great form, that Moscardelli ended up signing for Rimini. And this team was a special opportunity. They had only just been promoted to the second tier, but they had clear intentions of making it to the top, which is now made very obvious by the signings they made. Getting the likes of Andanovic and Alessandro Matri, both players would make it to the biggest clubs in the country only a few years later. With just a tad of luck, Moscardelli could have followed that same path, but for some reason, Rimini never gave him much of a chance at becoming a regular starter. I mean, over a span of nearly 6 months, the man was given 600 minutes of playing time, still pulled off 8 goals, literally the most out of anyone in the squad, and he still went the rest of the season without being afforded a chance at playing the full 90. But ironically, it was right here that the whole story tied together, because even if Rimini failed to see the potential he had, there was someone else who did. Rubin Kazan, one of the top-rated Russian clubs at the time, who would soon make their way to the Champions League. This is easily the moment that defined Moscardelli's career. Completely blown away by the rough diamond they had stumbled upon, the club was willing to offer Rimini €1.2 million for the player, as well as a salary of $1 million a year to Moscardelli. I'm sure to anyone else this would have been irresistible, but somehow Moscardelli rejected it. He claimed he felt good at Rimini despite the lack of chances. He said he couldn't imagine himself living in Russia, and above all, he insisted he couldn't leave Italy before he had managed to play a match at the top flight. That above all, that was his dream, to step where they had stepped, to feel like his heroes, like Totti, like Batistuta. And so, at 28 years of age, trying to prove to himself his decision hadn't been a mistake, Moscardelli began a race against time. First of all, as ironic as it might sound, Rimini ended up giving up on him and moving him to rival Cesena, getting €650,000 for 50% of his playing rights. However, I'm sure this move left him with a bunch of mixed feelings, as though he would be afforded much more playing time and quickly establish himself as the star of the team, even scoring 12 more goals than anyone else over the season. That was more of a testament to Cesena's incompetence than to Moscardelli's talent. as they would finish bottom of the league with no player aside from Moscardelli managing to get more than 3 goals. Regardless, his incredible efforts to keep the team afloat did not go unnoticed, and so while his teammates went down to the 3rd tier, Rimini signed them back after just 1 year, only to immediately resell him to Piacenza. A team where Moscardelli would strangely team up with Nangolan and the brother of Iago Aspas, Jonathan Aspas, initially struggling a bit with matching the goal-scoring numbers of his previous seasons, but still excelling enough that he was made captain before the start of his 2nd season there, where he finally got back on track, being the team's top scorer by a gigantic margin, earning them an astonishing 20 points over the season, which following a transfer market domino effect was enough to finally land him a move back to the top flight, ironically enough being bought by his old club Chievo Verona. And so, on the 29th of August 2010, at 31 years of age, Moscardelli finally got to live out his dream, debuting in the Serie A against Catania, and even more impressively scoring a decisive goal 15 minutes into the match that would give his team their first win of the season. Eventually, Moscardelli would admit in an interview, "I didn't even think I'd start so fast. I didn't even think I'd play. When the ball went in, I thought about how long I had waited for that feeling. I even let a tear escape. Beautiful." In fact, he ended up getting the date of that match tattooed on his skin and claimed that for just that goal, it was worth it to reject Rubin Kazan. And even though he'd score in the following match as well, the best was still to come. Despite the fact that 2 matches later he would end up being sidelined after a disappointing match versus Lazio, in November he scored the winner after being subbed on into a game against Inter, allowing Chievo to tumble the Giants and earning himself a start in the following match, against AS Roma. After 14 years in Italy, Moscardelli finally got to share the pitch with his heroes, and though Totti would miss that match, getting marked by his idol De Rossi was already a dream come true. I mean, the guy has literally tattooed his initials, and if that's not enough to convince you of how much of a fan he is, let me tell you what happened next. Moscardelli scored. He scored against Roma, and if that was enough to leave him with a bunch of mixed feelings, it all became even funnier when in the 85th minute, De Rossi had enough and completely ran over Moscardelli, being handed a red card, breaking Moscardelli's heart, who could not resist the temptation of arguing with the referee, demanding that he take back the decision of sending off his hero, even if that would work against his own team. Although Moscardelli never quite managed to settle himself at Chievo, over those 2 years he still managed to live out many other great moments, getting to play in the Stadio Olimpico versus Lazio, going head-to-head with Totti, but above all, earning the admiration of his coach, the now Italian champion Stefano Pioli, which led him to make several attempts to sign Moscardelli for his new team Bologna after leaving Chievo. This, of course, left Moscardelli so excited that it led him to make a promise that would change his life forever, telling his family, "I won't shave my beard until I sign for Bologna." Which, considering the negotiations would extend over to the winter market, meant Moscardelli would end up with the most glorious beard in the sport, completely by accident. However, something many don't realize is that he did shave it off when he finally made it to his new club alongside Pioli, as the sporting director had told him that the beard wasn't a good look for the club. Little did he know how much of an incredible marketing stunt this was, as by then the fans had gotten so attached to the beard that they began pleading for him to grow it back, a wish Moscardelli respected completely, as it now has been over a decade since he last shaved it off. In fact, he claims that he feels he's stuck with it, as his little son would not even recognize him without it. Regardless, already 33, his time at Bologna would not be the greatest, and even the honor of playing alongside the likes of Gilardino or carrying Roberto Baggio's number 10 on his back wouldn't be enough to change that, with Pioli eventually getting the sack and the club being relegated, leading Moscardelli to sort of decide to stick with playing at lower level leagues from there on out and regaining form as he jumped from club to club, leading both Lecce, Arezzo, and Pisa Calcio to the promotion playoffs over the next 5 years, becoming the undisputed king of the Serie C, finishing out his career by achieving promotion to the Serie B with Pisa Calcio, leading them to a 9th place finish in the 2nd tier, their highest in almost 30 years, and finally retiring. Except, hold on for a second. that wasn't the end. Moscardelli had once promised he would shave his beard off if he got to play for Roma. And though that didn't happen, he did get something very similar, as he was invited by Totti to join him in his team playing in the Lega Calcio a 8, pretty much the 8-a-side equivalent of the Serie A. And not only has he played, he's probably the best player in the competition, becoming the top scorer with 30 goals in 16 matches. I mean, even Totti has only managed to find the back of the net 13 times so far. So yeah, I guess you could say, in the end, his dream did become true. And though I could now go on a rant, showing you that the higher he got in the football pyramid, the more he struggled, or telling you that he's a false image that compilations could make any player look like Maradona, I'll instead remind you that it is much more fun to just believe the fairy tales. So instead, if you ask me why his career failed, I'll tell you that Moscardelli was simply too good for the Ballon d'Or.